All right, man, peace. So, brothers, this is going to be the preview for the Manny Pacquiao versus Keith Thurman welterweight championship bout that will be occurring tomorrow night at MGM Grand. From what I've seen in the build-up to this fight, nothing has really caused me to change my original prognostication, that being that most likely Keith Thurman is going to be the victor in this bout. I do believe, of course, that anything can happen, especially when you have world-class fighters in the ring. Manny Pacquiao is someone who has a lot of heart, great intangibles. So would it shock me if he were able to, quote-unquote, pull off the upset? No, it would not. But I do believe that if he were to pull off the upset, it would probably have to deal with some type of late charge that occurred in the bout from around rounds 5 or 6 to the end, in which he out-hustled Keith Thurman, maybe kept him on the back foot, and won many of the exchanges. But I'm just not quite sure if that can happen, especially at this point in Manny's career. There has been a drop-off. Even though a lot of people don't want to acknowledge it, there has been a drop-off in Manny Pacquiao's overall proficiency as a fighter. And if you know what you're looking at, you can tell when you watch him against Broner or against Jeff Horn, fighters of that ilk. He does not have the same flash, the same lightning speed with his feet, with his head movement. He cannot continue on with his rapid combinations like he used to 10 years ago, and that's natural. That's a part of aging. But I do believe that Keith Thurman is most likely going to win this fight. I think that he's going to be the younger, fresher fighter. Now, from what I saw in Keith's last bout against Josecito Lopez, if that Keith shows up in this fight, he's going to be in trouble. Because I do believe that if Manny Pacquiao were to be able to stun him, that Manny's going to be galvanized to throw enough shots for the referee to step in. And the ref is going to be looking to step in if Keith gets hurt, and he's going to have to be very cognizant of that. He cannot allow a moment in this bout to occur like what occurred in the bout against Josecito Lopez, because Manny Pacquiao is a fan favorite. He's a media darling, and they're going to be looking for any way to help him steal this fight, especially as he comes down the stretch run of his career. For the sake of boxing, Keith needs to win this bout because we want to see him against Errol Spence. Errol Spence has a mega fight of his own coming up, I believe in September, most likely, even though they have not officially released the date of his fight against Sean Porter, at least as far as I know. But should Errol Spence be victorious in that bout, which I expect him to be, finally, or at least hopefully, we'll get the fight between Errol Spence and Keith Thurman. If Keith finds a way to weasel out of that one, he'll never be able to live it down. So that fight is definitely going to have to happen in the near future for the sake of the welterweight division. But just getting back to this fight tomorrow night, what are the keys to victory for Manny Pacquiao? He's going to have to keep moving, especially early on in the bout. The first 4 rounds, he's going to have to make sure that he moves his head, because that is when Keith is at his most aggressive. Also, Manny's going to have to maintain a consistent body attack on Keith Thurman, try to wear him down to the body early if he can, and hope that it pays dividends in the second half of the fight. Once again, that is Manny's best chance in my view, is to out-hustle Keith and hope that the officials will give him the benefit of the doubt and grant him the decision so that he can once again perpetuate this mythos about himself as being the classic underdog, the person who gets counted out. And, you know, that's a major part of how they market Pacquiao. If you followed how they publicized this fight over the last 2 months, it's very clear that Pacquiao is considered the in-house fighter, meaning he's the fighter who they would like to win, because that's how they could market him later, maybe potentially for a Floyd Mayweather fight. Keith Thurman is who needs to win for the best interest of boxing overall. But Pacquiao, without a doubt, has been marketed, he's been publicized as the person who the house wants to come out victorious. When I say the house, I'm talking about Leonard Ellaby, Al Heyman, etc. But we'll see what happens over the course of this fight. What are the keys to victory for Keith Thurman? He has to make sure that he does not get too sloppy. If you watched any of the documentary for the build-up of this fight on Fox Sports 1, there have even been snippets where Manny Pacquiao has spoken to his trainer, Freddie Roach, and stated that Keith Thurman is very sloppy when he throws his punches, that he has no defense at all when he throws those wide hooks. And that's very true. Keith does get sloppy, especially when he throws those wide-ass hooks looking for knockouts. But what Manny has to understand is that he's a lot faster than he looks on television. That's the reason why he's able to land a lot of those hooks. I saw an interview with Danny Garcia in which he gave his prediction for the fight. And he was speaking about Thurman. He said, I could see Thurman's punches, but they were very fast. He stated the same thing as Pacquiao, that Thurman throws a lot of wide shots, but he was able to see them. But because they came so fast, they connected early. And if you watch that fight, Danny Garcia performed much better in the second half of the fight than he did the first half of the fight. The problem with Danny is that he's just not that fast with his hands. He has decently fast hands, but when he gets in there against elite competition, his hands are not up to par when it comes to hand speed. So that cost him in his fight against Keith Thurman. It also cost him in his fight against Shawn Porter. But just getting back to Manny Pacquiao, he's going to have to make sure that he takes Keith Thurman very seriously, which I believe that he will. He's going to have to try to hurt him early, go to the body, as I've already stated, especially with hard, straight left hands if he can, and just maintain his defensive awareness, because when you throw that straight left hand like that, there's always a possibility that Thurman is going to counter with an overhand right. So he is going to have to be very cognizant of that. Also, when he comes in to try to pursue Thurman, if he were to be fortunate enough to have a combination land, Thurman is going to grab and hold. So while he's grabbing and holding, hit him to the body some more until the ref breaks it up. At every moment, every opportunity that he has, he should be trying to go to Keith Thurman's body. Don't worry about the head early on in the fight. The head will be there. Just pay attention to many of Keith Thurman's other fights, against Collazo, against Porter, against Danny Garcia, against Lopez. He will be hittable to the head from about the 6th round onward. That is Manny Pacquiao's chance. If he goes for the knockout early, it's a very good possibility that he himself will get knocked out. As I stated the last time that I spoke about this fight, Manny Pacquiao is a fighter who, when you look over his resume, and it's no disrespect, he's an all-time great, but he has been matched extremely well over the course of his career. From the time that he left junior featherweight and featherweight, when he fought fighters like Marquez and Barrera and fighters of that ilk, some of the great Mexican fighters in the low weight classes, he's been matched extremely well. I believe that he fought Marquez at lightweight. Maybe it was their rematch fight, I think it was. Other than that, he's been matched very well. They brought Oscar De La Hoya down 10 pounds to a weight class that he had not fought at in 10 years, 10, 11 years. The man looked like a skeleton, all for Manny Pacquiao, and got his ass wazazazuped. Then Manny was able to jump into the ring against Ricky Hatton, a fighter who was mentally, psychologically, and spiritually broken by Floyd Mayweather. And that was Pacquiao's probably most devastating knockout of his career. Then he was able to engage Miguel Cotto in what I still think to this day, up to now, has been Manny's most outstanding individual performance. And when he was at his peak as a steroid user, fighter, in that bout against Miguel Cotto in 2009, when he was exceptional. The fight started out relatively even, and Manny pulled away. But one of the reasons why he was able to do that, and he even cited that in the build-up to this fight against Thurman in one of these documentary episodes that I saw on Fox Sports 1, when he was giving some advice to one of his sparring partners about how to look at or how to view his boxing career. He said, you have to work very hard. And he said, in my fight against Miguel Cotto, it started out relatively even the first 4 rounds, and then I pulled away because I had greater stamina than he did. But one of the reasons why he had greater stamina than Miguel is because Miguel came down and fought at a catch weight with a rehydration clause. These are just facts. And then when one of the most fixed fights that I can remember against Joshua Clottey, where Joshua Clottey just looked like a Ghanaian heavy bag, Manny Pacquiao was literally hitting the man, and Joshua Clottey was not punching back. It was very clear that there was a deal that was made with Clottey under the table by Bob Arum, and we have not seen Joshua Clottey since that fight, amazingly enough. So Manny's been matched very well. That's not to take anything away from his great heart, his great stamina, how hard he trains, how hard he punches, how fast he is, but he's been matched very well. And the standards that have been set for the great fighters, for some reason, do not apply to Manny Pacquiao. He's able to get into the ring against fighters like a Brandon Rios, fighters like a Chris Algieri, and nobody says, why is he fighting those guys if we're calling him the best fighter of his era? I saw an interview with Shane Mosley. They had a sit-down panel with Shane Mosley Mikey Garcia, Josecito Lopez, Sean Porter, and Shane Mosley, with his usual punch-drunk self, said that when he's trying to figure out who's the best fighter of this era, the era that just passed, is Mayweather and Pacquiao or Pacquiao Mayweather, 1 and 1A. I'm like, what is this fool talking about? It's not even close, and there's no disrespect. Manny Pacquiao's phenomenal. But if you're talking about the best fighter of the era, you have one fighter who was able to go 50-0 without a scratch, defeat more world champions than any other fighter in history, have the most proficient offense and the best defense, according to stats, of any fighter in the history of the sport, make the most money, revolutionize the business paradigm of boxing, and introduce full random drug testing into the sport. Whether people think that he was using or not, you have to understand that he's the one who introduced the understanding that boxers should be drug tested, especially for major bouts. And on top of that, he is now Manny Pacquiao's boss. That is Floyd Mayweather. It's not even close. And on top of that, when they fought, he won. So this notion that one is 1 and the other is 1A, no, so I don't think so. It's not particularly close, and nothing against Manny. When it comes to accomplishments and who's more prolific, then you can make the case for Pacquiao, because he was able to become a world champion in 8 different weight classes. But even when you scrutinize that, many of the titles that he won were vacant titles. So it's very clear that the machine was behind Pacquiao and has always been behind Pacquiao. And now that Pacquiao has joined the Mayweather stable, the Al Heyman / Floyd Mayweather / Leonard Ellaby stable, they're taking that same energy and applying it to themselves. That's why I state that it's very clear that they're marketing Pacquiao as the in-house fighter, as opposed to Thurman, because they probably expect Thurman to win. But you get behind Pacquiao because he's a feel-good story. Just getting back to Keith Thurman, I don't see really how he should lose this fight. I think he could lose this fight, but he shouldn't lose this fight if he's taking his training as seriously as it has been depicted on the Fox Sports 1 documentary series pertaining to this bout. If he's done everything that he's supposed to do, if he approaches it with the seriousness that I expect him to approach this fight, he should win it. And he should win it really in spectacular fashion, because Pacquiao, as I've stated, has not fought many real welterweights. I think that Keith Thurman has a better chance of knocking Manny Pacquiao out than Manny Pacquiao has of getting a stoppage or maybe even getting a decision. But we'll see. We'll find out. As of right now, I'm going to pick Keith Thurman by decision, and I do believe that he's going to get a knockdown in this fight, possibly early. Maybe the 2nd or 3rd round, he's going to get a knockdown in this fight when Pacquiao tries to dive in. Now, it's very difficult to time Pacquiao. It's very difficult to time him. But I think that if Keith is able to time him and hit him with something solid, a solid right hand, he can get the knockdown. So as of right now, I'm going to pick Keith Thurman by decision with a knockdown. But if Manny Pacquiao were to win this fight, would it shock me? No, it would not. And after this, what's next for both fighters? If Keith wins, as I believe he should, it's going to be Keith Thurman and Errol Spence. And it's going to be like the film The Last Dragon. Errol Spence is going to come into the ring. He's going to say, "Playtime's over, boy. Kiss my Converse." And Keith, that might be the first fight that ends on a technical knockout before the fight starts from one fighter defecating on himself in the ring. That's my early prediction for the Errol Spence versus Keith Thurman fight. In all seriousness, I expect them both to be meeting up with one another sometime next year, maybe in April, somewhere around there. And we'll see what happens with that. Should Manny Pacquiao lose, as I expect him to, what's next for him? I do believe that they'll try to make him some type of exalted gatekeeper, put him in a ring with a couple of blown up 140-pound fighters that he can look good against and try to build them back up again. Maybe give many of these welterweights some time to move back up to 154, because I see Pacquiao as somebody who's probably going to try to fight until he's in his mid-40s. Like, he really loves to fight. He loves to fight. So I don't think that they're going to try to run him off, and then he has a huge Asian market that they can tap into, which is the reason why Bob Arum was constantly trying to push Pacquiao and match him so well all throughout the mid to late 2000s into the early 2010s, because Pacquiao opened up a market in boxing that had never been opened up before. In the same way that Julio Cesar Chavez opened up the Mexican market, you had Manny Pacquiao who opened up the Asian market. And that's why they kind of marketed Pacquiao in a very similar way to how they marketed Julio Cesar Chavez. And, you know, Chavez got in the ring with Pernell Whitaker and should have lost the fight, but they gave him a draw because he was the person that boxing was trying to push. Pacquiao was meant to be this generation's Julio Cesar Chavez, but Mayweather outsmarted everybody. They wanted Floyd to get into the ring with Pacquiao in 2009, with Pacquiao juiced to the gills. That's what they were hoping for. That was going to be their best chance, but Floyd outsmarted them. But we'll see what happens with Manny. I can definitely see him, as I've stated, becoming an exalted gatekeeper should he lose to Keith Thurman, especially in a dominant fashion. If he were to get wazazazuped or knocked out in the 4th round, something like that, I could see him, they have him fighting some overblown 140-pound fighter, maybe 3 or 4 fights, build him up, wait for the welterweights to move up to super welterweight, and then give him another title shot. But Keith Thurman, brother, you could run, but you can't hide. And I do like how Keith has tried to market this fight. He's utilizing a tactic that Cassius Clay used. The only thing is, I don't like the way in which Keith is doing it. You have to understand that it's very dangerous when you're fighting against a fighter, especially a great fighter that has a spiritual foundation, and you try to attack their spiritual belief in any way. That's very, very dangerous. And when you look over the history of boxing, there's precedent for that blowing up in someone's face, especially, for example, Muhammad Ali. You have certain fighters who tried to attack him over the name that he chose for himself. As we all know, he went from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali. You have certain fighters who tried to attack him about that, who tried to attack him from that spiritual perspective, whether it's Floyd Patterson or Ernie Terrell, and they got their asses wazazaz up. The only fighter who was kind of sort of able to go that route and be successful was Joe Frazier in the first fight, and that's because Joe Frazier, he kind of had good energy on his side for how Ali did him, how Ali tried to cast him as the quote-unquote white man's Negro and the Uncle Tom and so on and so forth. So Frazier had good energy on his side, even though he utilized a tactic that normally does not work, which is attacking another fighter, especially a great fighter's spiritual foundation. Keith Thurman, for those of you who don't know, claimed that he was going to crucify Manny Pacquiao, knowing that Pacquiao is a very devout, or at least claims to be a very devout, quote-unquote Christian. And Pacquiao has stated that that has amped him up. So if Pacquiao were to win, I'm sure that he's going to mention this after the fight. Normally, when you try to pick at another great fighter, you want to pick at carnal fighters and try to attack their mental weakness, their mental fragility. Like how someone would attack a Mike Tyson, or someone who is very physically imposing, but mentally has flaws. When you attack someone's spiritual aspect, that's normally doesn't work. Normally blows up in your face. But we'll see what happens. Once again, I believe that Keith Thurman is going to win a decision and most likely knock Manny Pacquiao down early in the fight. So peace.